Hello and welcome back to the Races Now YouTube channel. I'm Matt Hill and I'm joined by our resident Races Now expert Adam Smith. And in the latest edition of our Horse Racing Explained videos, we're talking about buying a racehorse. I'm sure it's something that many people have often thought about doing, or maybe thought what actually goes into the mechanics of buying and having your own racehorse. So Adam is the perfect man to run us through this process. So Adam, I'm going to put you in a hypothetical situation here. You've just been convinced by a mate to buy a racehorse. You've cobbled the money together. What next?
Usually the process would be to get in contact with a trainer and then go from there to maybe look at acquiring a horse, either a horse that the trainer already owns or has access to, or go to the sales and buy a horse. That probably is the more expensive route to go. But what you'll find is, particularly in the UK, a lot of trainers buy horses speculatively with a view to, so they do own the horse, but with a view to selling it on to owners, either new owners or owners they've already got. So often you'll be buying horses directly from the trainer. And then just taking a flat horse, for example, you can buy horses when they're 1 year old, for example, and then they would be in pre-training for a year or so. The earliest they can run in their career is at 2 years old, usually running in maidens, which is races. The only horses that have never won a race can run in. If you win your maiden, maybe first race, maybe second race, then you're on the up. You're having a look around to bigger and better things. But if you don't win your maiden, you have 3 goes in a maiden. You can have more if you want, but you can have 3 goes in a maiden and then get what we call a handicap mark, which is a rating, a central rating from the British Horse Racing Authority. Then you can run in things that we call handicaps, which sometimes that's where you find your level. They might be a little bit easier to win than maidens, and away you go from there, really. So a 2-year-old handicap, they happen towards the back end of the season in July, August and September. We actually call them nurseries, but for all intents, they're handicaps. And then you can come back as a 3-year-old. And you know, some horses, those that aren't at the top level and haven't got a value for stallion duties later in their career, will often run on the flat until they're 6-7 years old and then take a rest after that. The better quality horses often hang around for a little bit less. They earn their money on the track, but more importantly, they get a stud value. And then a handful of horses, it might only be 10 or 15 horses a year actually in the UK that are deemed good enough to go to stud. So they stand at stud, and then people pay to bring their female horses to them at a fee, anywhere between 10 and Franco is £300,000 at the moment. So yeah, that's the kind of the way it goes. But there's always different longevities to careers, and particularly on the jumps. If you have a jumps horse, they can't really race until they're 4. Or sometimes 5, and then they might hang around until they're 12 or 13 if they're having a good time. They have no stallion value as the crown jewels have been removed, so you get more fun out of owning a jumps horse, maybe. But I've been in the game 14 years, Matt, and it's never something that has attracted me into owning a horse. When I first started, someone said to me, the best way to make a small fortune in horse racing is to start with a large fortune and buy a horse. There's very, very few that make money out of it.
Yeah, so that leads me on to my next question, I suppose, because we talk about the process there of the horse's journey, you know, going in, having its first few races, finding its level, and then setting suitable targets, because there's still good pots there in the lower echelons of the sport, isn't there, if you plan it right. But I guess from my perspective, as somebody maybe buying a racehorse, what kind of fees are involved in this? Because I know it's how long is a piece of string, but it's not a cheap hobby, is it?
No, but although you can, there's a couple of things I would say there. You can buy horses for pretty cheap if they've not shown anything, if they're not bred very well, for example. You can buy horses that have already been in training, so second hand, if you like, that maybe haven't been performing well, but a change in scenery or a new trainer or a different type of race might pick them up. But as with everything in the world, the top echelons, it's a hell of a lot of money, and because the evidence or the evidence or the prediction is that if they're bred well, i.e. there's a stallion that did very well in his racing career and a female horse that done very well in her career, that would mean that some horses can trade at millions of pounds. But also I would say about ownership, there's some really big owners, if you like. Some of the money from the Far East with Sheikh Mohammed from Dubai, for example, owns Godolphin, and has got hundreds and hundreds of horses worth hundreds of millions of pounds. But also you can do something like what we call syndicates, where, you know, up to 500 people get together and they all chuck a tenner in each. You know, that's 50 grand. So, you know, there is different ways to get in, but usually the more expensive horses that are purchased, they're the ones that hover towards the top, and the cheap horses hover towards the bottom, where there's less prize money.
And I suppose the other caveat there is that there are like upkeep fees as well, aren't there? So you've got to pay your trainer, presumably. You've got to pay insurance, presumably. So I think a lot of people will think, okay, I've got the money for my racehorse, but that's not the end of the cost.
Oh, absolutely not. No, there's obviously different places across the country to where your horses can go to train. There's hubs, if you like. We have a hub in Newmarket, Lambourne, Moulton in North Yorkshire, and there's a couple around the borders in Scotland as well. But to have a horse in training for a year in Newmarket, which is where most of the flat horses are, is around £24,000. So it's a lot of money. So obviously you're paying for the horse to be housed, to be fed, looked after. Vets fees are in there, insurance. All sorts of different things are in there. So yeah, there's not many people that make money from owning horses. There's plenty of people who make money from breeding horses, but that's maybe for a different video. But in the UK, where the prize money is not as good as some other jurisdictions around the world, yes, it's hard. It's difficult to make money. But what we're seeing more often at the moment is that horses, particularly on the flat, that are in that B level, if you like, so they're not quite in Division 1, where you can make it pay here in the UK, but they're in that Division 2, the top ends of the handicaps, the Class 2 handicaps, maybe have an official rating of around 100. Those horses are more and more being attracted to go and race in the likes of Hong Kong and the likes of Australia, where the racing is slightly easier for our horses to go over there and win. So you might not be able to win a Group 1 over here in the UK, but a Group 1 by the same name in Australia is more winnable. We've seen that happen quite a lot. So you'll see a lot of owners that get persuaded to sell their horses to the Far East and Australia.
Okay, interesting stuff then. If you were thinking about buying a racehorse, I'd get that piggy bank and get it filled a few times over, I think. But yeah, thanks for that, Adam. I hope you're enjoying this Horse Racing Explained series here on the Races Now YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you again very soon.